Welcome to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. We are the go-to resource for leaders looking to greatly improve their communication skills, whether it's one-on-one interactions, team settings, public speaking, or your digital communication. By improving these skills, leaders can create stronger connections and drive positive change within their organization. Each and every episode, we sit down with leaders from various fields, just like you're grabbing a cup of coffee with them. We dive into real, practical conversations. Our goal is to help you transform your communication skills so you can lead more effectively, build stronger relationships, and make a lasting impact. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's learn together. Well, how do you communicate in high stakes leadership situations? As you continue on with your company or your business and the stakes get higher and higher, do you let nervousness take over? Do you let a rise of anxiousness fill your communication? Do you back away from those communication opportunities and crumble under the pressure? Oh my goodness, we're going to talk about all of this in today's Speak with People podcast episode. I am joined by someone who should have been on the podcast long ago, and I'm so glad that we're able to finally make this happen. His name is Dennis Neel. He has been a longtime friend. We'll talk so much more about that in the podcast conversation itself, but he has been an executive leader for many years. Oh my goodness, I don't even know where to start. He's a race car driver, and he's a great friend, and he's a co-founder, business partner of Speak with People. Speak with People would not exist without Dennis's vision, without his investment, without his wisdom. And so I'm just so excited. Dennis, welcome to the Speak with People podcast.
Thanks, Jason. It's a pleasure to be on. And it's been a little bit since you started the podcast, and I've avoided it for this long. But I guess it's finally time to throw in and go into the podcast.
See, I love it. I love it. This is great. This will get us warmed up for when, as we dream about the future, as we're able to, get a Speak with People mastermind and those kind of things as we're pouring in the business leaders. So this will be great. Well, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit more about your story? I could tell some really fun chapters of it, but I'd rather it come from you, who you are, what you do, what's kind of got you to this place.
Yeah, so I'm many things. That's probably the fun part. I think we all are many things. So for me, I'm a business executive. I've been in the industry for 22 years, I guess now,
Wow.
which is awesome. I've got a lot of experience in different roles. I worked my way up through the ranks, which was a lot of fun, sometimes stressful, and had a lot of different experiences. You talked about race car driving. I've been racing something since I was 10 years old. And I still do that today. And so I've had a lot of opportunities there. I ended up on a reality TV show of all the things I never expected in my life that I would end up doing. Reality TV was not one of them. I ended up doing that. So that was a lot of fun. Very different experience than what I've had in the past doing different things. I'm a CPR and first aid instructor. That was how I got through college, was doing clothing retail and helping my mom out with her CPR business. And so I've done that for a number of years. And then, you've got the family side of I'm a husband and a father of a little guy who just turned 10 recently. And so he's having a blast, and we're doing all the different sports things and all of that fun. And, they start to get their own personalities, and you get to constantly change and flex with that. So yeah, that's, and then I guess, we helped found Speak with People. I don't know if you want to tell that story. If you want me to, I can tell my side of it.
I would love that.
But
Yeah, go for it. Let's do it.
yeah, I mean, I know you had a vision. You had a vision for what you could do for helping leaders and growing leaders in their communication. It was definitely something that I've seen over my career, where communication skills are extremely challenging for people, and I think you've seen it too. And so I'm actually at a racetrack, and we're in a thunderstorm delay. So there's lightning. We can't go play. So we're sitting there underneath this big awning outside of a trailer. It's pouring rain in Atlanta. Middle of summer. It's hot, it's rainy, and we're sitting there having a conversation on the phone about dreaming this dream up while I'm in a fire suit in the middle of a thunderstorm, and we're talking through it. And that was kind of the spark that started Speak with People. We was walking through your dream of what it could be, and then with my experience of living in the day-to-day business world where, yeah, people can't communicate, and communication is the cause of most problems on any one of our programs or anything that we're trying to do.
Yep.
You can usually trace it back to someone didn't communicate correctly.
Yep.
And so, yeah, that thunderstorm and phone call was kind of how it all kicked off,
I love it.
at least
And
for me.
you talk about communication, they can't communicate correctly. I think so often leaders just assume, well, it's just my public speaking that I need to work on. And the reality is they're talking with their boss, they're talking with their employees, all of that communication. If they can't do that in a well-connected way, it just falls apart. And so
Yeah,
that's why I just love what we're doing.
yeah. I mean, we communicate every day. It is the one thing that you do, and as a leader, you think people hear exactly what you hear in your head when you say it, and that is not the case.
Right. Boy, that's absolutely huge. Yeah, I go back to that summer a couple summers ago, and I'm driving around Tampa area. We're connecting on the phone. And I do want to say for our listeners, when Dennis says he races cars, this is not like a go-kart track where you're doing like 25 miles an hour. This is, what's your top speed?
It depends on the track, but like 130, 140.
Jeez. So, just a little bit, having to deal with those turns and all of that kind of stuff. But, we're just, sort of dreaming this thing through. And a few years before that, I've been kind of coaching some pastors and leaders online and was like, okay, maybe there's something here. And then you just sort of poured vision on, some ideas, and you're like, well, what if we, and those, what if we, phrases, really took root. And I think 2 years into it, for any other business owners, entrepreneurs, teams listening, I was sort of hoping things would happen overnight, very quickly. And you kind of helped keep me paced, like, hey, this is going to be a climb. And I think at the 2 year mark now, we're really starting to kind of come into our own. We've niched down, we're finding some good spots, and you've been a guide for that entire way to kind of get us here. So thank you. I don't say thank you enough. You and Caitlin have been absolutely huge, and so it's been exciting. Now we just yesterday sent some SOWs or SOWs for 2 new banks. So now I think we're up to like 10 different banks, half a dozen of them Fortune 500, that we've worked with, and so just amazing.
Yeah, and I think I mean, not to get too deep too early
Yeah.
in this, but that's one of the lessons learned of just any dream is be flexible in it. I mean, if you would have asked me 2 years ago, oh, let's go target the banks, and that where the communication skills would be
Yes.
where they would be the most hungry for it, that's not where I would have started.
Yep.
And yet it is where we are.
Yep.
And so be flexible with your business, be flexible with where you want it to go, watch the industry, see where people are pulling. Because if you're just pushing your product, that, that gets tiring, and you really want to find someone you're gonna push and they're gonna pull, and that partnership is what you're looking for. So go
Wow.
find that wherever it is and be flexible, because sometimes it pops up in places you don't really realize. I would say, you know, we've been flexible. We talked through it. Sometimes I'm sitting here and you're dreaming a big dream, and I'm like, all right, Jason, we gotta make that manageable. And then other times you're pushing me like, hey, Dennis, I think we can go do this. And I'm like, hey, you're passionate about it. Let's go try and see what happens,
Yep.
and take that learning. So yeah,
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So speaking of, though, our kind of conversation today with, how do you communicate in some of these high stake situations, your career, you've had, quite a few of them. Is there a moment that, kind of sticks out to you where, that kind of high stake communication was critical? And you had to walk into it. What did you learn from it? How did you kind of walk through all of that stuff?
yeah. So I've spoken in front of 600 people. I've been up on stage. We did that at a conference with you. Early on, we did our speakers conference. I've been in small rooms where we're having a tough conversation with a small group of people and having to have those hard conversations. I'm going to make it really real for everybody here. You've probably all interviewed at some point. What is more high stakes to you in your life than going in and walking into an interview? You don't
Oof.
know what they're going to ask. You don't know what they're looking for all the time. you have a description of a job and you have a resume of who you are, and you're trying to sell either over the course of an hour, the course of a day, and you're trying to sell yourself that I can do all these things and you want me, what could be more high stakes than that? And you want that to be successful.
Wow.
So, I figured I'd just make it real. Like, everybody's been in an interview. Communication is critical in that. It's a very short period of time for them to get to know you. It's a very short period of time for you to convey who you are. And for me, the biggest thing that you would do is you prep.
Mm.
So prepare yourself for what do you want to say. We talk a lot about in some of the communication stuff that I've done with speak with people and at my job is, come in prepared into the room. So if you can see the room ahead of time, that's amazing. I was having a talk just recently, and it was 300 people in a room. I looked in the room before I spoke there. I went up to the front and looked at the room from that perspective, rather than just standing in the back of the room and go, okay, there's all these chairs. So I went up to the front, looked from the stage, and looked back at the room. So that way, when I got up on stage, it wasn't the first time that I saw it. Always practice your opening. Same thing in an interview. Practice that opening. How are you going to describe yourself? Most interviews allow you right up front, hey, why do you think you're a good fit for this job, and why
Yep.
were you interested?
Yep.
That is pretty much how an interview always opens. You prepare that. Have that script. Some people love to write it out. I'm more of a bullet person, so I put bullets down of what I'm going to talk about, and just practice that first 2 or 3 sentences at the very least, so that way you can say it and it will calm you down. Caitlin wrote a blog post a long time ago, 321, of just things you hear, things you can see, things you can smell, just to get your senses under control, to control, take that body that's going out of control, that's in the flight or flight mode, and just calm it down, get back recentered, and be, breathing exercises. People love to do those. Whatever works for you, try different things and see what calms you down. But, having that scripted first couple of lines that you're going to say, so you can flow into it, so you don't have to think about it anymore.
So good.
It'll
Yeah.
flow in, so, and those steps work from an interview where maybe you're one-on-one or you're going to a panel interview. And it also works when you're the person up in front of a couple hundred people, or maybe you're just in front of your team of 15 or 20. If you get nervous in front of your team, think about how you're going to open it. Maybe you're running a staff meeting and you're trying to convey something that's coming down from higher up in the company. Yep. What is it that you want to talk about? Throw some bullets on the slide to help you. Use the different crutches around you to be able to calm you down and just be in that moment, be able to deal with the uncertainties, because there's going to be uncertainties anytime you get in front of a large group of people or a small group of people. We've all gone to this virtual world. How many times do we sit here and say, can you see my slides? No, I can't see your slides. What is going on? Why doesn't this work? Be ready for those moments. Be ready when your slides just stop working sometimes. I think you experienced that recently, where the slides just stopped. It's like, okay, let's go to the backup plan. Yep. So have those backup plans and just gotta roll with it. It happens. People are used to it at this point. And, just be comfortable enough in the moment that you can deal with those situations.
Oh, boy, that's so good. You hit on such an important part too in the preparation. And I think so often I talk to leaders who are just, because again, like we talked about in the beginning, we communicate so much that we sometimes under prepare. And you read stories or you listen to interviews of some of the best athletes out there, or, some of the most incredible speakers or pitch people, or, they're preparing like crazy. And so even if you're a listener, and even if it's, you're going into your boss and you're pitching, hey, something's not working in our systems, I'm bringing a solution. You just cannot prepare enough for that. That's just so huge. How have you, because, you've dealt with some meetings that are, pretty important, lots of zeros involved. How have you, mentally, emotionally kind of gotten to a place where, as you walked into those meetings, you've kept your composure, you've kept ready. I know part of that's preparation, but didn't know if there's, anything else you'd add to that, especially with kind of keeping your emotions and your mental thoughts straight.
I mean, I think it's stay confident in yourself. If
Oof.
you're being asked to do this, or
Yeah.
if you think that this is something that should be done, you're probably the best person to do this. So be confident in that. Don't sit here and worry, oh, well, maybe they'll ask me something I don't know. That happens. It happens all the time. Say what you do know. If you're in a work meeting, take an action. Like so many times I have to teach some of my younger program managers, take the action. I'm mean. I sometimes will take them down a rabbit hole, and I'll just say, okay, I'll just keep asking them questions because I know they don't know. I
Yep.
can tell they don't know, but
Yep.
I'm going to see how far will they go before they just stop. And it's funny to watch their direct boss will be like, stop talking, stop talking. It's like, and but that's a learning moment for them. Is hey, sometimes you don't know, take the action and get back to somebody, and then that follow up is a part of your character, and be able to show that, hey, I'm willing to say when I don't know something. So when someone tells me they don't know something, I trust what they say more
Oof.
because they're willing to tell me when they don't know.
Wow.
And so many people get into the spot of I have to know everything. Yeah, you need to know a lot. You need to be able to go to that first level of question with the audience or the leader that you're working with, but you don't have to know every nitty gritty detail.
Yep.
If you're bringing your team if it's a work meeting and you're bringing your team, rely on your team. That's why they're there with you. Maybe you have an engineer or a business person that knows that detail. Call them in the meeting. Hey, I think it's this, but hey, Joe, what do you think?
Wow.
What have you seen? Bring them into the conversation. So many times we as leaders forget that we have a team that's making us the the strong leader that we are. Use them. If it's one of these big presentations and you're just kind of up there in the front, just have that confidence that you know what you're talking about, and you will get some crazy questions. I've sat on some panels and done some things, and people it's question time, and they get on a soapbox, and they're just here to tell you about something. That happens,
Yep.
and sometimes you just got to have that confidence in yourself that I don't need to engage in whatever's happening right here. I can go, hey, that's a great, you have a great point. Let's follow up afterwards. And that way you don't have to do it in front of the entire room of people that you're in. So you know, I would say just be confident in yourself. If you're the one that's being asked to do this, or you feel that you can do this, you probably can. Take
Wow.
coaching from people. You know, this is a whole nother topic, but have a mentor, have a coach, have a business partner that's willing to bounce ideas with you. Don't do it alone. Uh, we're always stronger when it's not just hard ideas on paper that we're trying to work through. If we can use that, some of the preparation, we talked about prep. Maybe you prep in front of a couple people.
Yep.
If you're getting ready for an interview, that's a good thing. Especially if you're a large company and you're getting ready for an interview, go ahead and do a mock interview. Grab a couple of people that are at that level that you're trying to get to, and just have them go ask you questions. Uh, Typically, big companies, they have a kind of a canned set of questions, or at least kind of topics that they like to ask. Or sometimes you can even find out, hey, this leader always asks this question. I have a couple of questions that I always ask people, just because I think it shows a lot of their character. you know, Go see if you can find those out, and then prep with somebody.
Mm.
Go through it ahead of time. So I mean, that was a lot of points. I don't know what you like
Ah,
and what you don't with that one, Jason.
that was great. No, no, it was awesome. I was just thinking about just even, last Tuesday night on our Tuesday night call, I'm dealing with a situation with one of the companies we work with, and just, you and I kind of going back and forth trying to figure out, the right solution, the right way to communicate with them. So even being able to have that voice, being able to do that is just so, I mean, it's just so huge. So for our listeners, who is that voice for you? Do you have that trusted voice? Because I think it's just so incredible to be able to
Yeah,
bounce those ideas off, and just, feel that unity to be able to go, okay, this is what this is the direction we're going. So,
yeah. I mean, so often in life, we're not doing things alone. We're doing it with other people, and doing it with teams. And you're always looking, for people to help strengthen, even if let's say you're a business owner and you're the only person in your business, you can still go find people that will go help you, that will bounce ideas off of you, that maybe have worked with the company that you're trying to work with. Maybe they have experience with invoicing with that company, and they're like, oh yeah, they always take forever to pay. Here's how I had success in getting it.
Right.
Like, go find those people. There's always someone else that's probably going through something similar or has gone through it in the past. And you just gotta be willing to go have those conversations with people and find them.
Boy, I love that. Kind of switching corners for a second, because you oversee and have overseen staff for a long time. We have people listening who are, first time overseeing a staff, listen, helping those kind of things. So even stepping into that coach role, when now your team now has to go do the presentation, or has to go be interviewed or do the interview, or, is called out in a meeting. What are some tactics? What are some, skills that you found successful, as someone who's overseen staff, to, continually speak into them to help them develop? I know we've covered a couple throughout, but that just kind of registered, thinking through your experience.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I do when my team's talking and I'm sitting in the audience is I start taking notes. And I don't take notes about what they're actually talking about. I'm taking notes about their presentation. And, do they have do they say 1,000 times? Do they have distracting body language? Is something about how they're dressed? You know, is there things about how they use the slides, how they look at the audience? Like, I'm just looking for all those things to try to coach my team to help make them better. When they and you want to give them good points, and you want to give them areas they can grow, and you want to find the right time to give them that information. And you have to know the person then. I've given a lot of feedback to a lot of people, and I haven't always done it right. I actually remember one time I was working with you, and I gave you feedback when you weren't ready for it, and that didn't work. You had just come off the stage, and you're like, I think that was great. And I'm like, I think that was bad. I don't think you landed it right. And here's why. And I'm like sitting
Yep.
here like ready to prove my point. And you're like, what? And it just wasn't the right time to have the conversation. We had the conversation the next morning,
Yeah.
and that was the right time to have the conversation when everybody had come down off the moment. You know, adrenaline has gone away, and you can
Sure.
actually have that conversation of, hey, here's what worked, here's what didn't. We need to have those conversations to get better, but we need to do it in a way that people are going to be receptive to it. So figure out what your team needs. A lot of my team, I just shoot them an email. They're so appreciative that I would even spend the time to give them that email, that I usually send it that night, so that way it's not right after they get off the front of the room and they sit back down at their laptop in the middle of the audience, and they get an email from Dennis that says, oh, you did all these things wrong. That's I don't do that. So I usually try to take the notes and I
Yep.
send it to them either that night or the next morning, because I want it to be fresh. I want it to be
Yep.
close to the time so they can remember what they did, and they
So
can
good.
take my feedback and be able to connect it. But you have to find that right time for that right person. Sometimes, if the error was so bad, maybe you do need to correct it right
Yep.
away.
Yep.
And maybe, and I've had situations where, I go back to like, hey, take the action. Sometimes it's my team that I will step in the middle of the meeting, and I'm like, you know what, Frank, that was a great point. I'm going to have Joe go look at that for you, because I think he's not ready to answer that. And we really should have an answer for you. And I'll step in and just stop the conversation. So
Wow.
that way, to protect my team. They
Yep.
might not like that I just did that, but you're the one sitting outside of it. And so you can see things that they can't see while they're presenting. So
Yep.
sometimes you need to do that. It shouldn't be very often. I've also seen leaders where they will say, well, what I wish Susie would have said was, and that's just terrible. Like, not only did you just take your leader and just demoralize them,
Yep.
but you also, in front of the audience that they were speaking to, you basically said they told you the wrong thing.
Threw him under the
They didn't
bus.
tell you what I wanted, and you don't want to do that. So
Mm.
you need to build up the person. If you're looking for them to talk about a particular topic to your audience because you think it's important, either you step in, oh, hey, Susie, those are some great points. And here's another thing that we do, like, add on to it, be additive to their conversation. Or, hey, Susie, those are great. What can you tell us a little more about this? And so
Yep.
that way you lead them to that conversation rather
Oof.
than saying things, these backhanded things of, oh, I wish they would have talked about, or what they really meant to say was. And how many
Right.
times do we see leaders do that? What they really meant to tell you was this. And I'm like, if they really meant to tell me that, they probably would have told me that.
Ooh,
Maybe you wanted them to
right.
tell me that and they don't agree with you. So now I'm trying to figure out who's telling me the truth. If I'm your customer that's sitting here in front of you, I'm trying to figure out who do I trust in this situation. And that's not ever where you want to put your customer or your clients into, is a situation where they're trying to figure out, well, who in this company can I trust? Because that's the voice I want to listen to. And now they're not listening to what you're saying. They're trying to figure out who's right.
Yep.
So yeah, you got to find the right way to give those pieces of feedback. You got to protect your team, especially when you give them something new. Try to build them up. I always have my teams try to start small, and a couple of times we've taken a risk, and sometimes it pays off, and sometimes it doesn't. We'll have some of our younger leaders go up in front of a big room, and we prep them ahead of time. We make them give their talk to us, but they get up there, and it's a different situation, and sometimes they get super nervous, and we just need to help walk them through what they're talking about. And we want to build them up, so we want to
Yep.
make sure that they're ready to be in that audience that they're going into by the time we put them there. If they're not
Absolutely.
ready, all we do is just make it like the client or the customer look at them and go, well, I'm not really confident in them. So
Right.
that first
Right.
impression is really important for
Right.
your client to have.
Because there are some good moments I found, especially as a leader leading people, to kind of push them out of the nest a little bit. Maybe moments they weren't expected for, that you got to stand up and lead. But giving a high stakes presentation, trying to do a new pitch, to a company, those are not those moments. To just,
Yeah,
you know,
no, and we all grow more when we're a little bit uncomfortable.
yes,
So let's get out of
yes,
our comfort zones. Let's lean into that discomfort a little bit and learn how to deal with it. And yeah, you don't want to take the person that's never spoken in front of 10 people
right.
and say, hey, we got this new product and you're going to pitch it to 1,000 people in this auditorium that you've never been in.
Yep.
That's a terrible idea.
Terrible. Right.
It's just
Right.
not going to work.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, public humiliation really doesn't do much to build trust. And you're
Yeah.
so right. Those little backhanded comments, ooh, they're just like little daggers. They're like, oh, did they really have to say? Oh, did they have to say that? It's just
Yeah, and
rough.
then what you've done is the person's now still in front of the room,
Right.
and now their confidence is just shattered.
Yep.
I disappointed my boss. I
Yep.
didn't give them what they asked for, and so now I'm sitting here and I'm demoralized, and now I've got to go talk about whatever you told me I need to talk about. Like, oh man, like I screwed up big time,
Yeah.
and that's just not where you want them. You want to prop them up, even if they're struggling. Prop them up. Prop them up or take them off,
Yeah.
one or the other, because you've got to have a strong person up there, and if you're going to take them off, realize what you're doing there is you basically just said this person can't talk to you anymore,
Yeah.
and so that's the big deal.
Yeah. Well, and I love the, example you used about us, because, if I could replay it, I would have loved to respond differently. I didn't respond in a way that's like, I mean, we weren't like going at each other or anything like that, but it was, I wish that I would have went, oh yeah, no, I see that. Okay, let me make the quick adjustment for the next one. But yeah, it was just, and we were hosting our own conference. It was all of our own content. It was like getting off the stage, and I didn't even realize I had gone like 52 minutes. I'm like, what? Like, what just happened? Like, pull the guy off, for Pete's sakes.
Well, and those are the things, like, and I'm hosting, so I'm the guy who's trying to keep us on
Yeah.
time, keep us moving around, and I'm stressing because of different things. I wasn't in a good spot to be able to go have that conversation because I'm kind of mad. And
Yeah.
that's not the time to go give feedback. Is when I'm mad, I need to calm down. So
Yeah.
I needed to step away too, and I didn't realize that. And you know what? That's going to happen. We
Oh
are
yeah.
all people, and we are going to get in those situations. And so you have to realize when that happens and go mend the relationship, and then have the conversation about
Yeah.
growing. And
Yeah.
that's what we had to do. I mean, that was
Yeah.
we worked on the relationship that evening, and then met in the morning where we could actually, like, we all got a good night's sleep. Well, kind of a good night's sleep. When you're hosting a conference, you're never going to have a great night's
Right.
sleep. We slept a couple of hours, and then we were able to kind of come at it, and with the idea of, hey, we're setting up the morning, we're prepping for what we're going
Yeah.
to do, what do we
Yeah.
need to take away from yesterday that we can make better today, and we had the right mindset at that point.
Yeah. Well, and you and I have quite a history. I mean, quite a history. When we go back a long time. So, I love when people meet me, brand new. They don't, they're like, "Oh, Jason, everyone loves Jason." And then, you get to know me, you know me for a long time. You're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, you're like everybody. He's got highs, lows, he struggles with this." Like we both have that
Yeah.
history with each other. So being able to hear each other, you know, that's
Well, I
really
think
that's
you make a really good point there. So if you're going to give feedback to people, there probably needs to be some sort of relationship already there.
mm,
If you really want your feedback to be taken,
mhm.
you know, because how do I trust the feedback? Because if I don't know you, like if you're like the CEO of the company and you tell me, hey Dennis, that was really good, but and you should add this to it. Okay, great, I will because I trust
Yep.
you because of where you're at in the company.
Yep.
If you're just some person that just took over a team and you're trying to give them feedback, you need to build a relationship with them first
Yes.
and explain the why behind what you're seeing and how and and I always hate this statement of what's in it for me, but give them a what's in it for them. Like, why
Yeah.
should they do this? What's it
Yeah.
going to do for them? Here's
Yep.
this new person that I don't know that's telling me how to do things. And the other statement I always hate is, I've always done it this way. Well, then, we should always question things when we've always done it that way. But, so it's like you got to have that relationship to be able to have the person actually take the feedback that you're trying to give.
Absolutely. I love that. And, as I've coached speakers before, one of the most fascinating thing about speaking up in front, especially if you get into a regular pattern of say, these high stakes situations, you're doing a big pitch here. I mean, contracts are on the line, you know, continued partnerships on the line, or maybe you're speaking at a regional conference or a conference and, 100 people, 200 people. The people who will come up to you right away, because there will be people you don't know and they'll want to give you feedback right away. The percentage of them ever doing what you just did is just really, really low because not many people are going to step into those leadership positions and actually be able to experience it. So I found sometimes as I'm receiving feedback from other people, yeah, I'll take the criticism, I'll take the critique, tell me the feedback, but I do have to in kind of for my own mental state kind of put, not that I put them in categories, but it's like, okay, you will never ever speak in front of 1,000 people. Yes, I'm going to listen to your advice, but when somebody comes to me who does this regularly, whew, I'm going to, really for sure do that. So you got to be able to kind of, think about it. And sometimes with those people who you don't know at all and they just want to like coach you and critique you right away, you know, there's a saying in the South that's, bless your heart. Like, so, I mean, that's
Yeah,
just huge. That's just huge.
yeah,
But like, I think for the leader listening who's looking for more of those opportunities, I think you nailed something there. Like, we've got to push ourselves. Like, are you putting yourself in a position to show your boss or your leadership team you're ready? Are you looking for opportunities to do that? Because if you're not, all of us just want the phone to ring and the door to knock and someone to say, but how often do those situations really happen? We got to push
that's the
ourselves.
rare thing. You're not going to find that very often.
Right. Right. And we have found that like, as we've kind of navigated speak of people, we began thinking, okay, we'll be more B2C. We want to drill into helping, speakers, leaders become, stronger in their upfront communication skills. And as we just kind of kept marching down the road, we had this conversation with a leader who said, hey, my main clients are banks. And could you put together a training, for one of their calls? And okay, let's try it, and then that opened up another door and another door. And it's just,
Yeah,
but neither one of us would have imagined what would have happened.
yeah, and you know, we're talking about high stakes things here, and you really got to look at every engagement that way, because you don't know all the time where these things are going to play out. And so that next engagement with someone that's just kind of doing a fact finding, maybe just you did a cold call, you sent a cold email, and they're like, "Hey, I'd like to know more." That might be the high stakes moment that you don't know that you're having.
Yeah.
So treat all of those engagements with the same preparation and the same thing that you would do if you're standing in front of 1,000 people,
So
because you
good.
don't know who is on the other side all the time. and that person might be the next big advocate for your company.
Yep.
And you want to engage them just the way you would an audience of 1,000 people.
Wow. I was thinking about, stress, and it seems to be when maybe we have kind of a planned high stake conversation or presentation or something. It seems more often than not, sometimes the stress gets accelerated, and maybe in your personal life some things fall apart, like you get a flat tire, or this happens and it makes you a little bit later than you seem, or your travel gets messed up on the road and now you've got to navigate those kind of things. How have you figured out how to, in your own personal stress load, manage that stress when those moments come? Has there ever been a moment where it's just hit such a high level that you're like, okay, I got to figure out how to deal with this before I step into, this presentation or conversation or whatever it is?
Yeah. So, I mean, for better or for worse, I'm great at compartmentalizing.
Mm,
When I'm doing something, I mean, that was the blog post I wrote about being all in.
mhm.
Wherever I am, I'm all in that moment, and that's great. It's also terrible because you have to deal with the fact that if I'm at work, I'm all in at work. If I'm on work travel, that's what I'm doing. I'll work 14 hours in a day and just be down and in the whole time because I want to go get this done. And then, my wife's like, "Hi, remember me?" So,
Yep.
there's that.
Yep.
So you gotta, but I mean, that's kind of how I've done it. I'm like, some of the times, and you know, if the house is dirty and that's what's distracting you, can you afford to get someone to come clean it? So that way it's one less thing that's sitting on there. If that's what's stressing you out, like what else can you do?
Yep.
You know, is there, can you throw some time at it where like, hey, if I spend 4 hours just doing this stressor goes away, then go do that. Take the time out of the day, make it happen, make it go away. If you can put some money against something that makes it go away, you know, if you can go get a friend to help you with something to make it go away, like you've got to understand how it's affecting you. So I would say, take a step back and realize what is starting to impact your day to day. If you're getting in front of customers and you're trying to deal with things, maybe you got to create some more space pre-meeting and post-meeting, so that way you can get yourself prepared as you go in and go out. Maybe sometimes you can just walk right in, but hey, you know what? Right now, there's a lot of things going on at home. There's a lot of things going on in the business. I'm a little stressed. I need 15 minutes prior to walking in with a client, so I need to go create that space in my calendar. I'll, I've had a couple of stories of, I'll go with my kid swallowed a screw story. So I'm working in some different places, and I'm in some meetings, and I don't have any of my phones because I'm where I'm working, and I'm 100% focused in on what I'm doing. I come out of that meeting to a voicemail, a text message on my personal phone, a voicemail, a text message on my work phone, and people looking for me. And I'm still hosting and still having to go to the next place. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, all of my things are blowing up. Well, my wife is with our then, like, I think he was 2 or something, 2-year-old son in the emergency room. He had swallowed a screw. Don't know how he got to the screw, but my wife was changing him, and he somehow got a screw and he swallowed it. And I'm like, "Were you?" And so I'm like having to go deal with this while dealing with my other things at work that I'm doing. I'm like, I'm having to manage that. And eventually I just had to leave. Like, I had to leave. I had to figure out how to leave.
Yep.
So that took a minute because I had to work through the situation. I'm like, okay, well, and I had to tell my wife, I'm like, I can't be there right this second. And I know you want me there. I need 20 minutes. I will figure this out. And then I got off the phone with her and I problem solved with one of my buddies at work. I'm like, hey, can you do this? And I'll do this. And then
Mm.
we did that. And then I'm like, and I had to leave. And I just had to go deal with that thing that was, which was the emergency room. He was fine. My wife got to dig through dirty diapers for a couple of days to make sure he passed the screw. We have a full body x-ray of my son at a very small age with a screw in the middle of his stomach. Like,
Oh,
okay, very
yep.
exciting. But,
Yep.
stress is going to come at you. And it's just
Yep.
figuring out how you do it. Like, I'm great at compartmentalizing, so I'm all in, and then I put those things to the side. But eventually they are going to encroach in if you don't deal with them.
Yep.
So how are you dealing with them? What are you doing? Are you creating space and time to deal with them? Are you at some point you may just have to say, you know what, enough is enough. I've got to go deal with this thing. So that way it goes away and I can get back to all the regularly scheduled programming, And so sometimes you just got to take a half a day and just
Yep.
say, you know what, I'm losing this. And people understand. Uh, have always been bad about sharing personal stories, and I've worked on that and gotten better at that over time because I'm like, no one wants to hear this, but actually they do. As
Mm.
a leader and a boss, people want to know that you're human, and so sharing a story like that was like, hey, my kid swallowed a screw and I had to go to the emergency room. No one is going to sit there and go, well, you weren't at this meeting, and we
Right.
had this. Like they're going to be like, oh, did you take care of that? Like, and if they do sit there and go, well, you weren't at this meeting, you probably should think about what you're doing at that company. But we'll leave that one on the side. Uh, so yeah, I mean, people do relate to your stories, and so sometimes you just need to step away. If you know if it's something that's constantly a problem, you need to figure out how to fix it because it's going to start impacting your work and it's going to start impacting those relationships that you have, and it may end up leading to a situation where you don't perform well or maybe worse than that. So, you got to keep reevaluating. I think self-evaluation and self-reflection of where
So
you're at
good.
is an important thing.
I love that. I love that. Okay, last question for you. Any advice to emerging leaders, young leaders, as they're looking to, improve their communication in some of these high stake environments, any, kind of parting wisdom you'd give to them?
Yeah, so I'm a big proponent of having a mentor. Have someone that's been there. If you're striving in a company to get to a certain level, go start talking to that person at that level. See if it's something you really want to do. See what they learned. How did they do it? Your path, either your path to go getting that next client, your path to getting that next promotion, or your path to going up in front of a group of people. It's never going to be the same as someone else's. But learn from each other. Take that feedback. How can
So
you
good.
better prepare yourself for someone that's already done it? That way, you haven't been in that situation, but if you can talk to someone who has, you can learn what they were surprised by. So you won't be surprised by those things. You'll be surprised by something else. And so, try to prepare for those things. Talk to people about what your strengths and weaknesses are. And you don't always have to fix a weakness. You have to be able to work around a weakness. A lot of people will sit here and say, "Well, I'm terrible at this." Okay, well, surround yourself with people that are great at that. You don't have you should probably try to level it up a little bit,
Yep.
but you don't have to fix it and be if this is your weakest point, you don't have to go be the expert in it. What are you the expert in? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And how do you offset that so that way your strengths come out and your weaknesses don't detract
So
from it?
good. So good.
So
Okay. As we wrap up, a couple of rapid fire questions. Do you have a favorite speaker? Is there someone that you just highly recommend? Every time you hear them, or maybe you heard them once and it's just resonated with you for years. You love to pass that talk on.
so I don't really have a favorite speaker, but I recently went to a leadership conference. Molly Fletcher,
Ooh,
amazing! Just the energy she brings, and just the storytelling, and just you feel like you're a sports agent when you're sitting there with her, and just some of the crazy ideas and crazy things. Like she just amazed me of how she could think outside the box, and so that's probably most. I'm pretty much a last in first out. Like what was the last thing? She was probably the best speaker I've had recently.
mm, I love that. She's amazing. Is there, if you're a podcast person, is there a podcast, either guilty pleasure or leadership development, that you just keep going back to, you love to pass on to your team members or friends?
Um, so I like to listen to things that are outside of what I normally
Mm.
uh my normal day-to-day business because I want to learn from other industries and learn from other things. So there's Wendover Productions on YouTube. I watch a lot of that stuff because they talk about different things. And now like I understand about trains and cargo ships and things like that. And then I Linus Tech Tips has a WAN show where they talk about all sorts of different tech things and you learn from leaders that are trying to grow a company. Like it's been fun to watch him grow his company and try to figure it out and just learn from what he is experiencing. So I try to find weird things that are not in my day to day that I
Yeah,
can maybe bring back an idea from into my day to day growth.
I love it. And is there a book that, you're just like, hey, if you're going to read one book, this is the one you've got to read.
So I'm going to give you three
Okay.
because I was going to do one.
I love it.
I just finished this.
Uh,
This is Unreasonable hospitality. I loved what Will did with his story. I love what he was doing as he was telling it. I just some of the leadership practices he was doing and allowing his teams, and the fact that like at the end he was failing his team because had this attitude of no one can do it the way I do it, and he had to get through that. Like that was awesome. If you're a new leader in a new role, the first 90 days, like this is a great resource of how do you step into that new role? How can you be successful? And you see leaders all the time. They come in and they try to make changes right away. That is, you don't know what you don't know. You need to go figure out what you don't know. And if you take that first 90 days, and it doesn't have to be 90 days, I sometimes can shrink it to, we all are like, well, 90 days, I can do it in 55. Fine. If you can, great. But do that. And then this is one of my favorite books, just autobiographies from different leaders. Steve Jobs. Just if you're trying to get in front of the stage, go look at what he did. Go watch the movie if you don't like to read the book, and just go see how did he prep for some of those Apple talks. He didn't just get up on the stage that day. He practiced it multiple times. He was very particular about the details. He knew what he was going to say and how to get himself into that moment. He knew what was supposed to happen. And then when it didn't happen, he knew enough about what he was talking about to be able to flex and move around with it. So just, some of that stuff, it was fun to watch him prepare for some of these big talks and these, big Apple things. Everybody knows Steve Jobs sitting up on the stage. Go look at how he prepped and how he was ready.
I love that. These are incredible, and we'll put those in the show notes along with the couple blog posts you mentioned that you wrote, and Caitlin. These are absolutely fantastic. Dennis, where can we send people to find out more about you, connect with you?
So DennisNeel.com. It's a great place to go. You'll see some racing pictures. You'll see some business things that I do. LinkedIn, I'd love to get to know you on there. So those are probably the two best places to go find me.
Dennis, this was incredible. Like always, every time we connect, I learn something brand new, and so I know our listeners will. I so appreciate what you do and bring, and look forward to grow and speak with people in the future. This is going to be great.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, Jason, and maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Thank you for listening to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. Thank you for leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and thank you for every like and every comment. Every single time you cut and copy a link and send it to a coworker or a friend, it absolutely means the world, and it helps each other transform our communication skills. Lastly, don't forget about a great resource that's available to you, our communication skills library. At the end of every episode, we ask each guest their favorite speaker, their favorite podcast, their favorite book, and we've compiled all of those resources together to give you an amazing library to continue your growth and development. Thank you again for being a listener and for being a part of the Speak with People community.